Who was the mysterious Shams Tabrizi? Was he a knowledgeable person, or was he an illiterate mere dervish? How do we know him? Do we know him only from Rumi's poems, or do we know him firsthand from his own words? In this video, we are going to be seeing who Shams Tabrizi is and how the discovery of his discourses, that is Maqalat, help us understand him, understand who he is and what his thought is. Before, we didn't know Shams much. We knew him only from Rumi's poems or from some accounts that this and that person gave us, until things changed. After discovering Maqalat, that is a collection of discourses from Shams Tabrizi himself, we know him much better now. We now can understand his thought better. We can understand his educational background better. We can understand the nature of his relationship with Rumi better, based on Maqalat. In this video, we're going to be examining Shams Tabrizi's discourses. In the Maqalat, Shams Tabrizi says about Rumi, "I was a hidden jar full of divine wine, but the jar was buried. It was Rumi who opened that jar, and whatever smell you enjoy from that jar comes from Rumi." Again, in the Maqalat, Shams himself says about Rumi, "مرا فرستادند که آن بنده نازنین ما میان قوم ناهموار گرفتار است. دریغ است که او را به زیان برند." They have sent me, that is from the unseen world, that our dear servant, that is Rumi, is stuck with not very kind people. It's a pity that he gets harmed. I don't want to turn this video into an account of how Rumi and Shams Tabrizi met. I've already done that in several of our previous videos. In this video, I will be giving you a brief overview of how they really met, and then examine Shams Tabrizi himself and the Maqalat that he has gifted us with. Although several editors have edited Shams's Maqalat in the original Farsi, a recent one and a quite reliable one is that of Dr. Muhammad Ali Muwahhid, which is not only a collection of his essays, but also an annotation of those essays. There are 314 essays collected, reliable ones, and he explains certain terms, he explains certain intricacies and complexities that is difficult to understand, both because of the language and because, you know, he's Shams. There are several accounts of how Rumi and Shams Tabrizi met, but as Muwahhid points out, the most reliable one seems to be that of Risale Sepahsalar. According to this account, Shams Tabrizi came to Konya. In this instance, we're going to see that they have met before. Shams Tabrizi came to Konya dressing like a merchant. He is staying in a place which is an important place where rich and people of power come. And there are stalls, like they come and drink tea and talk. And Rumi and his companions come in. Everybody respects Rumi, they show him their respect. And amidst that, Rumi turns and sees Shams. He stays there looking at Rumi, staring at him for some time. Then he goes and sits in one of those stalls. After some time, Shams asks, "Oh Maulana," that is Maulana Rumi, "what do you say about Bayazid Bastami, the great Sufi, who said, 'Subhani ma a'zama sha'ni'?" That is, he praised his own status, saying how transcendental, how great I am. A phrase reserved only for God in the Islamic tradition. But, adds Shams Tabrizi, that the Prophet of Islam, he was the Prophet, but said, "Sometimes there chaos within me, and I ask God for forgiveness 70 times a day." How do you consolidate these two? And Rumi's answer is remarkable. He says, in the journey of sainthood, wilaya, Bayazid Bastami came to a certain degree, but he stopped there. He couldn't see farther than this. And he thought, what a high status that station is. But the Prophet of Islam didn't. He was traversing 70 stages a day, says Rumi. And after achieving each stage, he turns back to God and asks him for forgiveness, that he spent energy and time in that stage, that he had his eyes on that stage. After this conversation, they come to each other, Shams and Rumi hug each other, and then they go to Salahuddin Zarrinkub's place. They stay there for 6 months, and in this period, no one but Salahuddin Zarrinkub is allowed to get in that place. So we do not know what happened in that 6 months, but we do know what happened to Rumi after that 6 months. Shams transformed him from the scholar he was into the mystic poet who was maddened by love that history knows. Interestingly, Risale Sabah Salar tells us that Shams was the person who asked Rumi to have that Sama dance, to have that whirling dance that we today know. Shams tells Rumi that the Sama dance is forbidden to the general public because they are the slaves of their desires. If they do it, it's because, well, it is either fun or their ego desires. But for those who are the awliya of God, the friends of God, who have reached a high status in the spiritual journey, in that intoxication, in that whirling, they see nothing but God. That's why Rumi, says Shams, you should do it, but the general public should not, which says a lot about all these tourist-loving, whirling dance ceremonies that we see today, that the public participate. Shams's companions were bothered by what Shams did to Rumi. They wanted their old jurist Imam back, and Shams did not allow that. They were not happy, they were mistreating Shams. So Shams was bothered, he left, he went to Damascus the first time, the first instance. Rumi is furious, he sends a group led by his son Sultan Walid to bring Shams Tabrizi back, and they do. Only after some time history was going to repeat itself, and it did. And before Shams left for good, he threatened with that. He said, look, this time I'm going to go in a way, I'm going to disappear in a way that no created being, he says, will find a trace of me. And that is exactly what happened. And he was a master of staying anonymous. Wherever he went, he did not let people know who he is. That's why they called him Bird, in the sense that he was jumping from one place to another. He didn't stay in a place for a long time. And when he did, people did not know who he is and what his spiritual significance is. Shortly, we're gonna see why that was the case. There are several accounts of what happened to Shams Tabrizi after he left for a second time. Some say that he was killed by Rumi's companions, but that is the weakest account. Because we know from history that even Rumi himself went to Damascus several times searching for Shams Tabrizi. He was asking anyone who was coming from Damascus, did you see Shams Tabrizi? So Dr. Muvahid says, and I agree with this based on my readings, Shams's death, Shams's being killed, doesn't seem to be the case. If Shams Tabrizi was killed, why did Rumi go to Konya several times searching for him? Konya was a small city, the news spreads quickly, let alone the news as big as Shams being killed. It doesn't make sense. Shams Tabrizi went from Konya to Tabriz and from there to Damascus, or the other way around. And most probably he died of natural causes on the way. But do we know it for certain? No. So based on these differing accounts, there are several places that some claim that Shams Tabrizi is buried. One is in Konya, which appeared to be the weakest one according to history. One is in Khoy city near Urumia in Iran, near Tabriz. This appears to be the most consistent one with history where Shams Tabrizi is really buried. But do we know all this for certain? No. In the past, when masters, when sheikhs were speaking, their followers took notes, and then they brought those notes to the master. He checks them, kind of what we do in editing these days. And then they are formed as treaties, as book. That's what happened with Shams Tabrizi's Maqalat. Shams is speaking in gatherings and people are taking notes, and Maqalat are formed, except Shams did not check them. And that is the problematic part with Maqalat. We have a collection of several hundred discourses, but some of them appear to be flawed. Flawed in the sense that the disciple who is writing has misspelled some stuff. Sometimes the sentences are not complete, and at times there appears to be some additions to the text. For example, when talking about Shams, it says Shams, the grand scholar. Shams would never ever say something like that to himself. So it appears that it is the disciple's own words infused with the words coming from Shams Tabrizi's mouth. After discovering Maqalat, historical accounts were shaken. Some claim that there was no Shams Tabrizi. It was a figment of Rumi's imagination just to compose his poetry. For example, the Orientalist Edward Brown, quoting Nicholson, famous Nicholson, who has edited Masnavi, says that Shams was this illiterate sheikh, this person who was not knowledgeable. After discovering Maqalat, all these historical accounts were basically turned into nonsense. Shams was not the person they were claiming him to be. He was a knowledgeable person. He was an educated, an expert person. He himself says in Maqalat that I was a jurist when I was young. You know, there are some stereotype accounts these days that Shams was this illiterate person who came from nowhere. He did not have any educational background, and he just sits there loving things. He says no to reason and philosophy altogether, says no to theology altogether. Just sit there, love, smell flowers, dance around. This is nonsense. This is not the Shams Tabrizi that we see in his own words. Shams was a scholar. Yes, he was heart-oriented. He also had attention to formal education, to theology, to philosophy, though he prioritized love and mysticism. Even Sultan Walad, Rumi's own son, says about Shams that he was a person of high status. He was a knowledgeable person, and he has a way with words. And that is exactly what his Maqalat reflect. He composes his words unbelievably and masterfully. And reading, even a cursory reading of Maqalat shows how melodious and at the same time deep his sayings are. So this discovery kind of crosses out some inaccurate stances, I'm afraid lazy stances that even some Sufis took, who said only love, no to reason. That is not what Shams says, that is not what Rumi says. We have already discussed Rumi's stance in our videos. Yes, he is heart-oriented, but he also approves philosophy, reason, and rationality. How does that work? We need to refer to Rumi's videos. Here, we're going to be focusing on Shams's own words. Based on the Maqalat, Shams himself wrote like interpretations of the Quran, not a systematic exegesis, but he has very profound and mystical interpretations of the Quran. Based on Maqalat, we understand that Shams Tabrizi had contact with other scholars, with masters. He had debates with them. So as he was in today's so-called academic circles, he has also conversations with the famous Ibn Arabi. He has debates with Ibn Arabi. Sepah Salar says Shams Tabrizi has also expertise in mathematics and astronomy. Imagine that. The same Shams that has been introduced to us as this illiterate sheikh, this robe-wearing person, stranger. I do admit that Shams Tabrizi had this strange, unique character. Shams Tabrizi has this unorthodox behavior, approach, his appearance, his communication with others, but masterfully. Other than the account I gave you at the beginning of this video, that Shams says I was sent from the hidden, that our dear servant is stuck with these not very kind people. And these are the religious people. That is the painful part. These are the religious people around him. And by kindness, that is not an accurate translation. The literal word is not suitable. So these are the religious people of the era, and Shams is sent from the hidden to help him. We're going to see, according to Maqalat, that they have actually met way before they met in Konya. But this is another text that Shams Tabrizi's own words about Rumi. He says, به حضرت حق تضرع می کردم که منا به اولیای خود اختلاط ده و هم صحبت کن. به خواب دیدم که مرا گفتند تو را با یک ولی هم صحبت کنیم. I was begging God to show one of his friends to me, make me a companion, or make him a companion of me. He says, I saw in a dream that they told me that we're going to introduce you to one of our friends. I asked him, گفتم کجاست آن ولی؟ شب دیگر دیدم در روم است ولی گفتند وقت نیست هنوز. In another dream they told me that he's in Rome, in Konya, but they told me that he's not ready yet. It's not the right time. میلم از اول با تو قوی بود الا می دیدم در مطلع سخنت آن وقت قابل نبودی این رموز را اگر گفتمی مقدور نشدی آن وقت و این ساعت را به زیان بردیمی. I had a strong desire to be with you, to be your master, but I saw it in you, in the way you talked, your actions, that you were not ready. And if I said you what I say now, you're not going to be accepting those. So I waited. One of the reference books about Rumi is Manaqib al-Arifin by Aflaki. We have reference in this book that Shams and Rumi met way before they met in Konya. In one of these instances, Rumi sees Shams in Damascus, and he sees Shams as this strange person wearing black clothes, and he immediately recognizes his spiritual depth and powers. He grabs Shams by his hand saying, "Oh, the weigher of the world, will you help me?" I don't know whether the word weigher makes sense in English, but in Farsi it's used as something like measurer, someone with very sharp judgment and measuring skills. So he says to Shams, "Oh, the weigher of the world, will you accept me?" Shams, thinking that Rumi is not ready, disappears in the crowd, never to be found in that instance. Shams did not like to be known, and we know him both from history and from his own words. We have this particular text in Maqālāt. We have several texts that are very interesting, but this particular one is very shocking, and it tells us why he doesn't like to be known. He says, مرا در این عالم با این عوام هیچ کاری نیست جهت ایشان نیامدم. In this world, I have nothing to say, have nothing to do with the masses. I haven't come for them. That is huge, and it has very interesting implications. But there is this another text, again, I'm quoting Shams himself. He says, با هیچ خلق سخن نگفتم الا با مولانا. I have not spoken to any being except for me. And we know that he has talked to a lot of scholars, mystics. So he's trying to point to the high status of Rumi, an incomparable status of Rumi. He says in one of his Maqālāt, I was shocked to my core when I read this. He compares Rumi to even Ibn Arabi, and he says, Rumi, I have learned things from Sheikh Muhammad, by which he means Ibn Arabi, but it's not even comparable to what I have learned from you. Comparing Ibn Arabi to you, Rumi, is like comparing a stone to a gem. That little stone being Ibn Arabi and that gem being Rumi. That is shocking. That's what a high status Shams Tabrizi he sees in Rumi. Even Shams himself has had conversations, debates with Ibn Arabi, and according to what he himself says, he was higher than Ibn Arabi. He dominated the debate he was having with Ibn Arabi. There is another very interesting text in Maqālāt. Shams says, من مرید نگیرم. مرا بسیار در پیچ کردند که مرید شویم و خرقه بده. گریختم. I do not accept followers. They pushed me so much that I accept some people as my followers, that I give them a robe, which is a symbolic thing in Sufism as to accept someone as a follower. من مرید نگیرم. من شیخ میگیرم. I do not accept followers. I accept sheikhs. Here's the interesting part. آنگاه نه هر شیخ کامل. And not every sheikh, only the perfect sheikh. That is awe-inspiring. He says that I do not accept even scholars as my pupil. I accept only sheikhs, and not even every sheikh, only the perfect ones. So we now understand what his mission is. We now understand why he says, I have nothing to say to the masses. He was haunting the phoenixes. He was haunting the perfect mystics to transform them. What did Shams Tabrizi look like? According to what we see in Maqalat, he was an old man with little beard, not long, thin, and on appearance he looks weak, but he was very agile, very dynamic. And he has this fiery breath, he has this wayward words. He sits there silently, not speaking for hours, but when he opens his mouth, he doesn't let anyone get in the way. He had no care for established customs, for the rules. He was introvert at times, aggressive at other times. He was frank. He was brutally frank. He respects education, again, as opposed to the, I'm sorry to say, nonsense we hear. Just love, no reason, no rationality, just love, just flowers, dancing. This is not Shams. He himself, even in Maqalat, we understand that he didn't even act upon the Sufi principles much. He did not like going to what we call khaniqah. There is the Sufi establishments where Sufis gathered. He had no respect or care for the rituals they were doing, like cutting hair, giving rope. There's some term called chelleneshini, that masters assign 2 disciples to go in a corner for 40 days, eating little, only prayer. He doesn't like these. He dismisses them. He doesn't like giving students, the disciples, like dhikr, which is an established thing in Sufi institutions even these days. He's kind to these strangers, but at times he's very brutal, aggressive, and just straight with people around him, with people he has let into that circle. And this is part of his methodology. The people outside the circle, he's very kind to them. When he takes them in, when he accepts them as students, he conquers them. So that's why he manipulates and breaks those disciples' egos, their lower self, helping them to soar. And that is exactly what he did with Rumi. We have many poems in which Rumi himself says that Shams treats him aggressively. Not aggressively, but like in a very brutally straightforward way. You have lots of people around you. You cannot be my pupil. Go away, he says. گفت که تو شمع شدی، قبلی این جمع شدی. شمع نیم، جمع نیم، دود پراکنده شدم. You are like a candle. People are around you. You're their master, you're their imam. I cannot accept you as my student, says Shams. This is Rumi telling us. And Rumi humbles himself. I'm not gonna be that candle. I'm not gonna be that sheikh, that master. دود پراکنده شدم. I become that scattered smoke. I humble myself, accept me. The more Rumi becomes humble, the more Shams asks. And it is through this seemingly cruel approach that he helped Rumi transform. Dr. Mowahed points out in this edition, and I have experienced that myself, there are 3 obstacles for reading Shams's Maqalat comfortably. The first one is that sometimes Shams uses archaic words, old words, that may not be understandable easily to the young scholars. I've been reading Rumi and Shams almost all my life, but I still have difficulties, let alone someone who is new to the field. The second difficulty is that Shams is speaking to an elite audience. That is, he's speaking to Rumi and some select people from around Rumi. And the third difficulty is about how Shams speaks, and that's a reflection of his inner world. Shams is not a simple person. Like Rumi, he has this chaotic inner world. His thought is chaotic. There are currents, there are tornadoes, because it's not just rational discursive thinking to go from A to B, from B to C. He is receiving some mystical experiences. He experiences some stuff and then he puts them into words, thinks about them. So there's all this come and go, which makes his thought and the way he talks very difficult. Sometimes you read and all of a sudden you see that he's jumping to another topic. Another theme. Like what happened to the previous one. In a sense, he's following the footsteps of the Quran. You're reading Quran, you're in a theme, immediately that changes into another one, and there's this abrupt shift. I hope this video could shed some light on Shams's Maqalat. I'm going to be recording videos on every particular maqalah, every particular discourse from this magnum opus, trying to explain to the best of my ability what Shams wanted us to understand. Thank you for watching.